A few months ago, when I was 32 years old, I received a call from the bank about a loan application for 200,000 pesos. The strange thing was that I had not applied for any loan, nor did I know anything about it. Later, I discovered that my parents had requested that loan in my name to pay for my sister Melissa's dream wedding. Melissa, who is now 27 years old, has always been spoiled, and I have never had a close relationship with her. Although my parents also have some blame in this, Melissa is old enough to think about the consequences of her decisions. Even at family events, we hardly interact, so this surprised me a lot. What impacted me the most was finding out that my parents, with whom I have barely spoken in years, took out such a large loan without telling me anything, and to top it off, they made me a co-signer. Melissa has been with her fiancé Kevin for about a year, and they got engaged a few months ago. According to them, the loan was for their wedding, but the most absurd thing is that they didn't even invite me. To be honest, I expected not to be invited, so it didn't bother me that much. My parents also didn't mention anything about the wedding, so I didn't think it was a problem until the bank called me. After that call, I immediately called my parents. At first, I thought it must be a mistake, but they quickly admitted it. They even defended Melissa, saying it was normal for me, as her sister, to help with her wedding, even if that meant using my name for the loan. Apparently, Melissa had told my parents that she needed money for the wedding, and they couldn't refuse. The surprising thing is that both Melissa and Kevin have jobs, so they should be able to pay for their own wedding, but they said they couldn't cover the costs themselves. My parents told me that Melissa wanted an extravagant wedding, which made the expenses skyrocket. They even asked Kevin's parents for help, but they refused. Then, they set clear boundaries. Why couldn't my parents do the same? I refused to accept the loan, but my parents went to the extreme of forging my signature. They thought asking for my permission would be too much trouble, so they didn't even bother to let me know. When I found out, I couldn't contain my anger, but by that time, the loan had already been approved, and it was too late to stop it. I decided I had to fix the situation, so I made the decision to take my parents to court. My father kept insisting that it was natural for me to help my sister because we are family. He tried to make me feel guilty, saying that suing him would only hurt the family. He even used my sister as an excuse. After hanging up the phone, I was frustrated, and it became clear that my father cared more about Melissa's wedding than the fact that they had committed fraud. It was at that moment that I made my decision. I informed my parents that I was going to take legal action, and I prepared to cut ties with them. I called the bank to ask for copies of the documents related to the wedding loan, and I began to plan my legal steps very carefully to avoid any unnecessary consequences. I also consulted a lawyer to fully understand the situation and make sure I was prepared for what was coming. When reviewing the loan contract, I felt overwhelmed. What impacted me the most was seeing that the condition was that the loan had to be paid in 3 years. It was a huge responsibility that I never accepted. My parents knew that I was planning to start my own business soon. I had spent months securing financing and looking for investors. They also knew that I intended to leave my job, which meant that I would not have a stable income for a while. Despite this, they didn't care about my plans and got me into a situation where even a late payment could force me to cover the entire 200,000 peso loan. Feeling betrayed, I decided to take things calmly and plan my next move. I went one step further, logged into Facebook, and searched for Melissa's fiancé, Kevin. At that moment, something inside me changed. If my family had gotten me into this mess, I felt it was fair for everyone to know the truth. I wrote a detailed message explaining how my parents had taken out a loan in my name, forged my signature, and handled all the paperwork without my consent. I advised Kevin to think things over before marrying into a family capable of doing something like that. And I even suggested he break off the engagement. I didn't stop there. I sent the same message to Melissa's friends and family, and even to my own parents. I felt that everyone deserved to know what had happened. However, deep down, I couldn't help but wonder if I had gone too far. I also wanted to know if my sister was aware of the loan. She has always been very close to our parents, so it was hard to believe that she knew nothing. When I started asking questions, my parents became furious. They begged me to retract what I had said. and they began to communicate insistently with Melissa. It turned out that she had no idea about the loan, nor that they had put me as a cosigner. When she found out, she was furious. She felt betrayed by the lies and furious because now she would have to cover the wedding costs on her own. As expected, my mother exploded with rage. My mother got emotional, blaming me for ruining everything and saying that I had no right to get involved. My parents were angry because I told Kevin and his family the truth, but I ignored them. Thinking about everything, I wondered if it was really necessary to support my sister so much that my parents planned to deceive me just to give her the money. Later, I talked to my sister, and she told me that she didn't know anything about the loan but that I should have talked to the family before telling Kevin and his family. She accused me of ruining her wedding and her relationship. In part, she wasn't entirely wrong. Maybe I should have talked to the family first, but I really didn't know anything about the loan. I started to feel uncomfortable. I had gone too far by exposing the truth. Was it the right decision to bring Kevin's family into this? It only generated more chaos. Despite everything, I stood firm in my decision to take legal action. The bank responded, saying that they would investigate the fraudulent loan application, and since the loan had not been fully processed, I would not be responsible for any payment. That was a great relief. A few days later, things started to calm down. Later, I managed to get Kevin and his family's contact information. Meanwhile, my phone kept ringing. I received constant calls and messages from my parents, relatives, and friends. My sister also wrote me a very angry message, saying that I had made a private family matter public and that I had crossed the line. Later, she called me to tell me that Kevin and his family were reconsidering the wedding because of what I had told them. I felt completely confused. My sister accused me of ruining her life and destroying her future. She insisted that she didn't know anything about the loan, nor that my parents had put me as a cosigner, always saying yes to her. Now, they had even gone so far as to commit fraud in my name just to fulfill her wishes. She did not want to accept this easily, and since she did not seem to be lying, I began to doubt if I had been wrong in thinking she was involved. I wasn't sure if I could trust her, but I couldn't be completely at ease either. I wasn't ready to let it go so quickly. The next morning, my mother called me crying and begging me to reconsider what I had done. She told me that Kevin had broken off his engagement with my sister. I was surprised that my sister hadn't mentioned anything about it when I spoke to her the night before. She only told me that the situation was complicated, but she never mentioned that the engagement had ended. Hearing that left me speechless. My mother told me how devastated my sister was and how she blamed me for everything. It seemed that my suggestion for Kevin to reconsider the engagement made him realize how serious the situation was. My mother continued to accuse me of ruining my sister's life, destroying our family, and causing so much pain to everyone. I listened to her in silence, feeling guilty but at the same time strangely sure that I had done the right thing. Deep down, I couldn't deny a small feeling of satisfaction at seeing my parents face the consequences of their actions. However, I also felt sorry that my sister's wedding plans had fallen apart. When my mother finished speaking, I responded firmly that I was not going to apologize for what I had done. The truth is that we cannot forget that you committed fraud. I am not the villain here. I criticized my parents for signing those documents without my consent. But my mother still didn't understand the seriousness of what they had done. For the rest of the week, I felt exhausted. My mother kept repeating that I should have ignored everything for the sake of keeping the family together and at peace. I tried to avoid any contact with my family, but the rumors began to spread quickly. Relatives started sharing their opinions about what had happened. Some supported me, saying, "You have every right to be angry," while others commented that I shouldn't have made this a public problem. Meanwhile, my sister began to post a lot on social media, venting her feelings. Although she never mentioned anyone directly, whether it was about me, her friends, or someone else, it was clear that she was very upset. I felt uncomfortable seeing how people who did not fully understand the situation offered her sympathy and support. They wrote things like, "Some people just want to see others suffer," or "The worst betrayal comes from your own family." I didn't want to get involved in a social media argument with my sister, so I decided to stay silent. A few days later, my sister contacted me again. This time, she was calmer, although still upset. She told me that the engagement had been officially cancelled. She told me that she was breaking up with Kevin and that his family had completely cut ties with her. She also mentioned that she would be moving out of the house they shared and that she would be staying with a friend for a while. Then, she said something that completely surprised me. She admitted that she had always known about the loan. After repeatedly telling me that she had no idea and that she was not involved, she finally confessed that she had been aware from the beginning. She told me that she thought everything would be fine once the wedding was over and that she didn't think the loan would become such a big problem. She added that she never thought the bank would contact me directly. When I asked her why she hadn't told me before, she replied that she was too afraid. She admitted that they had planned to keep everything a secret because they were afraid that I would ruin the wedding if I found out. But once Kevin broke off the engagement, she no longer felt the need to hide it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Throughout the week, I had felt overwhelmed by guilt, and I even came to feel sorry for her situation. But now I realized that she had been part of the plan from the beginning. She seemed more upset because the plan to use the loan had failed and not so much because her relationship with Kevin had ended. In her anger, she called me a terrible and immature person. I calmly replied, "I don't owe you anything, and I don't need to return any favors to you." At that moment, I knew that I was done with her excuses. I realized how broken our family relationships were and that there was no way to fix them. After talking to my sister, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My family had never really cared about me, and I no longer felt the need to worry about people who were indifferent to me. But that conversation didn't change the mess that had already been left behind. Although I had not spoken to my parents in a while, they continued to try to communicate with me during the following weeks. Our relationship only got worse. My relatives were constantly calling me, trying to convince me to withdraw the lawsuit. They said things like, "But they are your parents. There is no other way to handle this." They seemed to ignore the fact that my parents had committed fraud and believed that the legal action I took was too harsh. I ignored their pleas and focused on gathering evidence with my lawyer. The more I discovered about what my parents had done, the angrier I became. Not only had they forged my signature, but they had also falsified financial records and lied about their income to secure the loan. Fortunately, the bank supported my side and decided that I was not responsible for the loan. However, my parents found themselves in serious legal trouble, which further worsened the family conflict. Meanwhile, my sister moved in with some friends, leaving her apartment to start over. She blamed me for her breakup with Kevin and was also angry with our parents for putting her in that situation. One day, I received an email from my Aunt Hannah. She had remained neutral throughout the whole matter and had not gotten involved in the drama. Anna invited me for coffee, and since she was not the type of person to cause trouble, I decided to accept. When we met, she asked me how I was doing. Talking to someone who was not trying to manipulate me made me feel comforted, and I appreciated her genuine concern for us. She talked about recent events and then mentioned my parents. "Your parents seem very shocked at the moment," she said as she stirred her coffee. "They are worried about what could happen if this goes to court. But honestly, they should have thought about that before committing fraud. I guess they didn't expect you to take things so far," she added with a knowing look. Her words made me feel more determined not to let my parents walk all over me again. Then, she asked me, "I understand how you feel. But what do you really want? Do you want a sincere apology? Or do you want your parents to face the consequences of their actions?" Her question took me by surprise. "I just wanted to understand your ultimate goal," she said kindly. I realized that I hadn't thought about things from that angle before. One part of me just wanted to get out of this mess, while another part felt that my parents should face the consequences of their actions. Maybe I just want them to understand that they can't treat me badly like that anymore. I said slowly. I wanted all of this to end, but I didn't know how to get there. My parents had always favored my sister, no matter what. And this time they had gone too far. I couldn't just ignore it. Anna nodded slightly. "I completely understand how you feel," she said. "But that's not how your parents see it. They see you as the one causing all the problems." Her words hurt me, but deep down, I appreciated her honesty. I already knew that's what my parents thought. When she said that, Anna added, "They will never admit their mistakes." She hugged me and encouraged me to be strong. "You are not wrong in how you feel. Even if your parents can't admit their mistakes, What you are doing shows more integrity than anything they have ever done to you. After our conversation, I spent a lot of time thinking about what I really wanted. I knew that my decision could put more strain on the family, and I began to wonder if taking this path to court was the right thing to do, or if there was another way to resolve it. A few days later, my lawyer called me with the news that my parents' lawyer had proposed an out-of-court settlement hearing. This made me anxious. My parents were willing to pay a significant amount of compensation if I agreed to withdraw the lawsuit. I wanted to move forward, but I wasn't sure if I should easily forgive them. The settlement offer was more than enough to avoid a long legal battle and at the same time hold them financially accountable. With my lawyer, I carefully reviewed the details. The money would alleviate my financial concerns and give me the freedom to focus on my business, freeing me from the stress that had been burdening me for so long. But even when I considered accepting the offer, a part of me worried that it might make my parents believe that I had forgiven them. However, this agreement felt like a small victory. In the end, it gave me the opportunity to move on and focus on my future. I decided to accept the offer and withdraw the lawsuit in exchange for my parents paying the compensation. Although this resolved my immediate problems, my parents still faced fraud charges from the bank. It wasn't the perfect outcome, but once the paperwork was completed and everything was finalized, I felt a relief. With the lawsuit behind me, I no longer had to worry about the mess. However, this decision changed my relationship with my family forever. The tradition of spending the holidays together was gone, and after this, there would be no more family gatherings. I thought I would feel at peace, but instead, I felt like we had become strangers, united only by blood and a shared past. The settlement gave me the freedom to focus on starting my new business, which was a positive step forward. But it was hard to let go completely. Even weeks later, the events would replay in my mind, and I had to accept that my relationship with my family would never be the same. Although they were still alive, it felt like I had lost them forever. I didn't want to get close, and I knew they wouldn't either. One night, while working late in my new office, I received an email from my Aunt Anna. She simply asked how I had been. I was surprised because we hadn't spoken since our last meeting weeks ago. In her email, she wrote, "I know this has been difficult, but don't carry everything alone." Her words touched me more than I expected. Somehow, she seemed to understand that I was struggling. I realized how isolated I had become, losing friends and distancing myself. A few days later, we met again at the same cafe where I felt most comfortable. Anna looked at me and said that family is not always about blood ties. Her words stayed with me as I thought about the settlement. Even though the money allowed me to move forward, I still felt conflicted about accepting it. I hadn't completely let go of my anger towards my parents. "Family is something you choose," she continued. "It's okay to find others who support you. You don't have to hold on to the past, even if your sister or your parents are no longer in your life." Her words resonated deeply within me. Letting go of the family, even after all the pain, felt like erasing years of trying to earn their approval, something that had shaped much of who I was. That day, I realized that it was okay to move forward without clinging to the past and that I could create a new kind of family for myself. I thought that moving on was impossible, but as Anna said, it wasn't. I didn't have to stay stuck in the past. With her support, I was able to start a new life without depending on the people who had hurt me. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't impossible either. Several weeks passed, and I used the money from the settlement to establish my own company. I hired employees and began to take on challenges that were significant and manageable. Little by little, my days became more fulfilling. Work had become my new passion, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. One night, as I was heading home from work, I received a call from an unknown number. Something about it made me uncomfortable, as if the past was not ready to let me go yet. I answered the call, and it was my sister. "I want to talk to you one more time," she told me. Her voice sounded calm, which surprised me. I hadn't spoken to her since her engagement was cancelled, so hearing from her again made me uneasy. She continued, "I just found out that our parents are selling the house. I thought you should know." Her tone sounded heavy. "You probably don't want to hear this from me, but our parents are in debt. They've run out of money." Her words left me speechless. I didn't know how to respond. They lost everything because of what happened with you, she said. And then added in a low voice. But I realized that this is the result of their own actions. I feel a little guilty. But our parents brought this on themselves with their fraud. She paused before saying, I don't feel responsible for their financial mess. But I don't know what to do either. I couldn't understand what my sister wanted from me. She had been staying with a friend. But she said that the situation had also gone sour. Was she looking for sympathy? Or was she asking for help? Finally, I replied, maintaining my calm tone. I know this is a difficult situation. But I don't think there is much I can do. Our parents made their decisions. And those decisions brought us here. What did our parents want? She immediately asked. I wasn't trying to start an argument. But her question took me by surprise. For the first time, I noticed a sensitivity in her voice. As if she was trying to understand the consequences of her actions. I still didn't know what she expected. But I knew where I stood and where I needed to go from there. I had rarely seen my sister so restless. The sister who had always been spoiled and raised to feel entitled now sounded anxious and insecure. You need to figure this out for yourself, I said softly. Try to handle it as best as you can. For years, I tried to talk to our parents. But I finally realized that I had to follow my own path. Maybe it's time for you to find yours too. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before she finally replied. Yeah, maybe it is. After that, we didn't say much more and ended the call. I wasn't entirely sure how I felt at that moment. A few weeks later, I heard that our parents had sold the house and were planning to move to a smaller one. Even then, I knew that I couldn't fix their financial problems or solve my sister's issues. I hadn't communicated with my parents for so long that I no longer craved their approval. But I realized that it was time to let go of that desire. For the first time, I was building something completely for myself. With the settlement money that I had earned on my own, I started a new company and began a new chapter. It hadn't been an easy journey, but I finally felt free from the expectations and control of my parents. I was no longer someone ignored. I was someone who mattered. Someone who could shape her own future. And now I was ready to move forward and live my life to the fullest.